The IDF's ground maneuver is beginning, and the pressure is on the Hamas terrorist organization, and it grows by the hour. And what are all the details about the expected developments inside the Gaza Strip conflict? The IDF is advancing in Rafah with the objective of expanding the security area in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, as forces are now operating in the al-Jenina neighborhood of Rafah. In an unusual incident in the central part of the Gaza Strip, an explosion occurred near an IDF bulldozer, a D9. It may have been an old explosive device. And after the explosion, terrorists fired mortars at our forces, who were unharmed and returned fire. IDF forces are also attacked by mortars in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and in response, the IDF spokesperson in Arabic issued an urgent call for residents to evacuate the area, and at the same time, the Air Force struck 40 targets in the Gaza Strip over the weekend, and despite these kind of incidents, Israel is intensifying its military pressure. The days after the resumption of fighting in the Gaza Strip, negotiations are still stuck, but political sources claim that the operation is achieving its goal as military and humanitarian pressure is cornering Hamas. In a related story, the citizens protest in Gaza and are meeting pushback as Hamas has launched an operation to suppress the demonstrations, summoning notable citizens and threatening executions of anyone who dares to protest, as well as trying to create the sense that the ceasefire is close in order to prevent demonstrations. And pressure is also increasing in the northern arena as Israelis ask the question, is the fate of Kiryat Shmona, an Israeli city, the same as the fate as Beirut, the capital of Lebanon? Israel is changing the equation regarding rocket fire from Lebanon towards Israeli territory and is striking Hezbollah targets in Beirut with American backing, as well as imposing new sanctions on Hezbollah. For their part, a source close to Hezbollah said that the organization did not respond to the first strikes in Beirut for the last 4 months. However, after postponing the speech that was planned for Friday, Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem spoke in honor of Quds Day and conveyed threatening messages towards Israel, but emphasized that the organization is committed to the ceasefire agreement. In his speech, he claimed that Israel crossed red lines and called on the Lebanese state to act against strikes on its territory. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us to what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East, as right now, decisive moments regarding Iran are drawing near. In the coming months, the United States will conduct indirect negotiations with Iran, while at the same time discussions with Israel, a military option of handling Iran's nuclear program, are ongoing. And meanwhile, the American campaign against the Houthis in Yemen is also continuing and intensifying, with United States President Donald Trump saying that the Houthis have asked for a pause after almost 2 weeks of continuous strikes. However, the Houthis have not stopped threatening global shippings, and they have also continued to fire ballistic missiles at Israel, including a missile this morning. In fact, it appears that for the Houthis, it is simply business as usual. And closer to home, the Hamas terrorist organization continues to play its psychological warfare game against Israel. The terror group has expressed agreement to the ceasefire proposal in exchange for 5 hostages. A new sign of life was published from one of the hostages, Elkanah Bukhbut, and Hamas conveyed information about the medical condition of the hostage, Idan Alexander. Also in the last 24 hours, the IDF and the Shin Bet announced that they have recovered some remains of the fallen hostage, Menachem Godar. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 541 in the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region who are acting under the command of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the region. And a moment before we begin, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. On Saturday evening, IDF forces began ground activity in the al-Jenina neighborhood in Rafah, aiming to expand the security area in the southern part of the Strip. In the course of the activity, the forces destroyed Hamas infrastructure and eliminated a squad that was involved in firing mortars at the territory of the State of Israel. The IDF is continuing its activity in several other areas across the Gaza Strip, working to enlarge the area where forces are deployed. However, the IDF has not begun large-scale maneuvers inside the built-up areas of Gaza, only operating on the margins of populated areas. However, over the weekend, the Air Force struck 40 targets inside Gaza, including rocket launchers and buildings where Hamas activity was observed, as well as individual terrorist leaders. Of course, there have also been attacks on our forces inside the Gaza Strip, and according to the IDF spokesperson's unit, 3 mortar shells were fired at IDF troops operating in the outskirts of Khan Yunis over the weekend. But there were no casualties amongst our forces, and in addition, a D9 heavy bulldozer hit a mine in the area, but again, there were no casualties from this incident. And in response, the IDF spokesperson in Arabic, Colonel Avichai Aderi, published a statement saying, "To the residents of Gaza who are in the Absan, El Karara and Khuza area, this is an early warning before an attack. The terror organizations repeatedly launch rockets from amongst the citizens. This area has been warned multiple times. For your safety, you must immediately evacuate westward to the shelters in the Mawasi area." Afterwards, the IDF spokesperson stated that a mortar launching position in the area was struck down. And in related news, attempts to restart hostage deal talks, or at least narrow the gaps between the sides' positions, have so far completely failed, while Israel demands adherence to the framework of the special envoy of President Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff. Hamas insists on a deal whereby only a small number of living hostages would be released. In addition, Hamas conditions negotiations for any deal on talks about a complete end to the war, including international guarantees and a United Nations Security Council resolution. In meetings this week in Washington with senior members of the Trump administration, Minister Ron Dermer discussed, among other things, the deadlock in negotiations for the release of the hostages. This is, of course, with an understanding that if the hostages are not released, fighting will continue and even intensify. Israeli sources stress that the Trump administration continues to give full backing to the strategy of intensified military pressure on Hamas. And speaking of military pressure, the first stage of Operation Oz Vecherev, which began on March 18, so far includes aerial strikes on Hamas targets combined with pinpoint ground raids, and according to the IDF spokesperson in the Air Force, the Israeli Air Force has attacked more than 430 targets since the start of the operation. The primary objective of the IDF's activities in Gaza is to wear down Hamas terrorists, eliminate the command and administrative ranks of the terrorist organizations, and basically destroy its rule over Gaza. Now, 10 days after the resumption of fighting in the Gaza Strip, senior Israeli sources emphasized that the operation is achieving its goals. The civilian population in Gaza is once again moving south, and this time, unlike in the past, Hamas is not managing to prevent residents from moving. According to the sources, another indication of the effectiveness of the military pressure combined with the cessation of humanitarian aid is the anti-Hamas demonstrations noted in recent days in several locations across the Gaza Strip, including Bet Lahia in the north, Gaza City in the center, and Khan Yunis in the south. An Israeli intelligence assessment of the situation concluded that the dynamic will be opposite of what Hamas hopes to generate, as residents are moving south and the crowding in the cities where the protests broke out is very severe. Competition amongst the residents over resources, including food and fresh drinking water, is growing day by day. In this situation, Hamas has no answer at the moment, and it could broaden the residents' revolt against the terrorist organization. The assessment is that soon we will see more demonstrations in more areas of the Gaza Strip. And of course, Hamas is not simply watching these demonstrations and doing nothing about them. Hamas is carrying out an operation to suppress the protests that have erupted against it in the Gaza Strip in recent days. This includes threats, harassment, and attacks on protesters. And in addition to that, over the weekend, Gaza media outlets identified with Hamas reported that 6 Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel were executed. Media portals affiliated with the opposition to Hamas have also claimed that they are even promoting the impression that a ceasefire is near in order to suppress the protests. This had some success, as since Friday there have been no reports of demonstrations in the Gaza Strip and no new videos have been published. If I can make a brief comment of my own about all of this, it is extraordinary that organized protests against Hamas happened at all, as this is obviously no freedom of speech in the Gaza Strip. There's no freedom to protest, and Hamas rules with cruelty and violence. If the population is ready to raise up against them in even this limited way, they must have found some amazing courage. It's probably, too late and too little. And it's unclear what the real motives are, but it's remarkable just the same. In Israel, the protests against Hamas are viewed positively, and preparations are being made for the next steps, including on Saturday evening when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, and Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir discussed the question of expanding Operation Oz Vecherev, and this subject was also discussed in the Security Cabinet on Sunday. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the Gaza Strip, and as always, we invite you to be part of our team by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media, and above all, make sure to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This makes all the difference. Now, we switch our focus to the northern arena, where Israel has changed its response policy regarding rocket launches from Lebanon towards Israel. In the past week, there were 2 incidents in which rockets were launched from southern Lebanon over the border into Israeli territory. And on Saturday, the Israeli Air Force responded by hitting more than 20 Hezbollah military targets in southern Lebanon and in the Dahya quarter of Beirut. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement on Saturday evening that anyone who has not yet grasped the new situation in Lebanon, that country, Lebanon, received another example of our determination just today. The equation has changed. What was before October 7 will not be repeated. We will not allow fire on our communities, not even a trickle. And Defense Minister Israel Katz added a warning that if there is no quiet in the communities of the Galilee, there will be no quiet in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, either. The fate of Kiryat Shmona, an Israeli city, is the same as Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. For its part, a senior source in Hezbollah told the El Mayadin channel that the organization remains fully committed to the ceasefire agreement and has no connection to the barrage launched from southern Lebanon towards the Kiryat Shmona area. He claimed that these incidents are part of a suspicious pretext for continued Israeli aggression in Lebanon. Israel's intelligence echelon is not certain who launched the most recent rocket attacks against Israel, but Lebanese opponents of Hezbollah have reminded all of us that nothing can happen in southern Lebanon without Hezbollah's knowledge and approval. These statements were true in the past and remain true today, as the organization's terrorists and its observation posts are still deployed throughout southern Lebanon. However, Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem spoke on Saturday evening on the occasion of Quds Day, a day later than he'd planned to issue a statement, and in his remarks he complained that we adhere to the agreement fully, but Israel does not. If Israel does not meet the demands, and if the Lebanese state does not achieve the desired outcome, we will have no choice but to return to other options. He went on to present the ceasefire agreement as an achievement and claimed that responsibility now rests on Lebanon's shoulders. We managed to prevent Israel from advancing at the border, and we reached an agreement through the state. Now Lebanon must act to end the occupation and prevent Israel from achieving political gains. I have a statement of my own to make to any Hezbollah supporter who watches these videos, and anyone else who is interested should listen carefully to what I have to say. Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem is a frightened, confused old man, and his blustering speeches should not be taken seriously by anyone. The truth is that Hezbollah's power has been shattered. They no longer have the ability to threaten Israel as they did in the past, and they are rapidly losing their influence even within internal Lebanese politics. Their opinion about whether Israel and Lebanon should improve relations is not relevant, and their vision for the future in which Israel and Lebanon will continue being hostile neighbors has already been rejected by most of the Lebanese people. This even includes their own Shiite community, which they claim to represent. I invite you to leave a comment on this video if you agree or disagree or want to know more about this topic. In the meantime, I'd like to tell you about an organization that we're proud to partner with here at TBN Israel, and that's Magen David Adom. As you can see in our reports, in Israel, emergencies can happen at any time. On March 24, 2025, a terrorist attacked civilians at HaTishbi Junction in the northern part of Israel. Tragically, 86-year-old Moshe Musa Horen was killed, and a 20-year-old IDF soldier was critically injured. So Magen David Adom teams arrived within minutes to that location. Paramedics gave life-saving care on the spot, stabilizing the young soldier and rescued him to Rambam Hospital in Israel. So thanks to their swift response, his life was saved. This is yet another reminder of how essential Magen David Adom is. When lives are on the line, they are there, no matter the risk, no matter the hour. But they can only keep going with the support of people like you. Your contribution today can mean that someone's loved one come home tonight. I'm talking about a mother that may see her child again. A soldier gets a second chance. So guys, please, if you can, go to savelifeisrael.com, help Magen David Adom, stay strong, stay fast, and keep saving lives. And now, we'll get back to the news and turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will take us through the developments between the United States and Iran and tell us where does Israel stand in all of this picture. Recently, the American president sent a letter to the Iranian leader in which he wrote, "We are ready for negotiations, but if you reject this outreached hand, the response will be decisive and swift." This letter constituted a clear ultimatum to Iran while emphasizing his desire for a diplomatic nuclear agreement. So where do things go from here, and what is Iran's response? So over to you, Mati Shoshani. Let us know what's happening.
These last couple days have been more of the same when it relates to the US tension with Iran, and specifically as it relates also to the state of Israel. So here's a recap of everything that's been happening. The Iranians, for, many years now, have been promoting their nuclear program. They've also been promoting at the same time a doctrine they call the Ring of Fire Doctrine. The Ring of Fire Doctrine is them essentially promoting proxy terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East to both threaten Israel and the allies of Israel, the Saudis, the Emiratis to a certain degree, the Qataris to a certain degree, and specifically, of course, Israel through Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and of course the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in the Arabian and Red Sea. So that's what's happened so far. Since President Trump has entered office, things have changed up on several levels. One, they're moving considerably faster, and two, the volume or the level of extreme rhetoric on this topic has increased dramatically. I'll remind everyone, President Trump gets into office, the first international leader he meets with is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They get together, and among many other things, Trump essentially says, Israel, we got your back. When it comes to Hamas, we have your back, and when it comes to the Iranians specifically, we have your back. The previous Trump presidency was marked by a very, very clear doctrine towards the Iranians, a doctrine called maximum pressure. The US pulled out or withdrew from an agreement that had to do with supervision of nuclear programs within Iran. They put maximum amount of sanctions and a maximum amount of international and diplomatic pressure on the Iranians. And I want to be clear, that worked really well. It hurt the Iranian government exactly where it should have hurt them. It put an incredible amount of diplomatic pressure on them, and it's something they want to avoid repeating again. But this time around, The US and Israel, to a lesser degree, are following a slightly different course of action when it comes to the Iranians. The US, and specifically Donald Trump when he came into office, said something very clear. We're taking maximum pressure when it comes to diplomacy, maximum pressure when it comes to sanctions, and the military option is completely on the table for once. But it wasn't just lip service, it was also clear action. President Trump comes into office, and immediately him and the US Minister of Defense start moving forces towards Iran. Large amounts of vessels, large amounts of aircraft, and B-2 strategic bombers that are all moving into this region. And the Iranians have taken note. They've been very, very clear in stating that they really dislike this course of action, which probably means that it's working incredibly well. And at the same time, they said that this isn't how you negotiate in good favor. And to that I can only say, very funny, Iran. The Iranians are the masters of manipulation and negotiation and drawing out discussions endlessly. And this is no different than any other case in the past. So here we are. Right now we're at the end of the month of March, and things are more tense than they've been in a very, very long time when it comes to Iran. The US has pushed an incredible amount of forces into this region, all the logistics, all the manpower, all the weapons needed for a full strike on Iran. Not only that, at the same time as they're upping the ante or upping the pressure on Iran when it comes to diplomacy and military pressure, something else is also happening. The US has been bombing the Houthi rebels in Yemen in a way we haven't seen before. And what this stems from is a statement made by President Trump saying to the Iranians, whatever your Houthi proxies are doing, you're doing. Whatever they need retaliation for will retaliate also to you. You are responsible for the actions carried out by the Houthi rebels. And the Iranians really dislike that. In fact, I think it scared them to a great degree because they started backpedaling wildly and stating, no, this isn't us, this is the Houthi rebels. So the Iranians have been strongly trying to disconnect themselves from the actions of the Houthis, and the US at the same time is stating one thing. It's saying we will pressure you when it comes to diplomacy, to sanctions, and to military action. Israel, of course, has been part of that to a certain degree. We've seen a small escalation in attacks made by the Houthi rebels against Israel, but it feels more like it was a symbolic attack over the last couple of weeks of a rocket here and a rocket there versus an all-out attempt to destabilize the region. What we are not really hearing about in the news and is happening in the background is the Iranians through the Houthis, and I think also through the IRGC, if I'm understanding the headlines correctly, or understanding the news between the headlines correctly, is the Iranians have been slowly turning up the volume on their pressure in the Arabian Sea. And this requires understanding and unpacking. The way the Iranians operate in this part of the world isn't by full-out war. They're not trying to beat the US Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines. That's not their goal. What they're trying to do is destabilize. The methodology of terrorism is to destabilize and put fear in the hearts of your enemies. And the Iranians are masters of that. What they're trying to do in this region, they're trying to oppose the, let's call it the virtuous flow or the virtuous wave promoted by the US administration. What is that flow? What is that wave of thought and actions? It's the US coming into this region and saying, we want to reach an agreement under which Israel has an agreement with Hamas, where Hamas is dismantled from its weapons, under which Hezbollah doesn't go back to being a fighting force in Lebanon, under which Syria is stabilized and isn't hurting its minorities, and importantly, where the Iranians are pushed back. And then the most important part is, and now we can trade, now we can exchange information, ideas, and share security assets. And they're thinking of doing that with the Saudis, with the Emiratis, with the Qataris, and most importantly, with Israel. And of course, I say that standing in Israel, for us, this is a huge win when this all materializes. And the Iranians are looking at that sort of movement of thought and saying, we want to oppose exactly that. One, we want to be at the table. We don't want to be pushed to sort of a back burner when it comes to Middle Eastern geopolitics. But secondly, they want to be the trendsetters when it comes to the discussions and events in this part of the world. And the US is pushing them away exactly from that. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in this really interesting place where for the first time in a really long time, Iran is really cautious and worried, and they should be, about the US actions against them. We're at the first time in a really long time at a place where the US and Israel have the ability, the assets, the political support, the logistics, and the plans to attack the Iranians, to dismantle most or much of their nuclear program, to bring down their government to its knees in a way they've never seen before, and to put at the same time international pressure both through sanctions, financial chokehold, and diplomacy, all pushing the Iranians into an agreement where they dismantle their military nuclear program and they come to the table to renegotiate their position in the Middle East. Now, the Iranians have been interesting in their response to this. What they're doing is saying, look, we want to negotiate, but we want you to commit to stop with the acts of aggression. And of course, that doesn't make any sense. When you're fighting a war, you don't remove from the table the loaded gun when you're trying to negotiate against an adversary like the Iranians. And the American government has done a very wise thing, and the Israeli government has done the same. They've placed on the table in front of the Iranians a palpable, truly capable ability to bomb their nuclear facilities in a way that will likely dismantle their government altogether. And the Iranians know this, and they're afraid of it. And it brings them to a place in the negotiation where they exactly should be. They should fear the response and respond to that by negotiating a pact and an agreement that prevents them from sending out their funds, their weaponry, and their web of terrorism throughout the Middle East, and forces them to dismantle their nuclear program. The only way to ensure stability for this part of the world is that way, is dismantling the Iranian nuclear capability, and is pushing back on their, what they used to call the Ring of Fire, now I just call it the export of terrorism endeavor, because they're much less successful than they were in the past. And there's one more important thing here, the item of timing. Now more than ever is an opportune time to hit the Iranians. And why is that? Because they've lost many of their levers of power. They've lost Hamas, they've lost Hezbollah to a certain degree, and they've even lost some of the intimidation that they carried by the Israeli multiple attacks within the boundaries of Iran proper. And all of that combines makes for the perfect conditions for Israel, the US, and Iran to reach an agreement where Iran no longer has a nuclear capability and they stop exporting terrorism throughout this region.
Thank you very much, Mati, for making order in all of this chaos. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue keeping you informed about the truth and bringing you everything that's hot in the Middle East on what's happening, boots on the ground in Israel. Don't forget to continue spreading the truth. And 1 second before we move on to the psychological terror of the Hamas terrorist organization against our hostages, I invite you to please click the subscribe button if you haven't already. And further afield, the United States military launched fresh strikes on the Houthis in Yemen over the weekend. This is including in the neighborhoods of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. The operation that the Americans launched against the Iranian-backed Houthis will enter its 14th day tomorrow. But so far, it appears it is still struggling to achieve its main goal, which is deterrence, because only today the Houthis launched a ballistic missile at Israel, and we had to find shelter all across the country. On Saturday evening, the United States President Donald Trump spoke about the strikes, claiming that the Houthis want us to stop so badly. I can say that our strikes every day and every night were very successful, beyond our wildest expectations. We will do this for a very long time. We can go on for a long time. However, Israeli intelligence assessments state that so far, the Houthis are not deterred from continuing their attacks. They continue to fire ballistic missiles almost daily towards Israel and are forcing global maritime trade to sail around Africa instead of passing through the Suez Canal in Egypt, which would dramatically shorten global shipping times. And additionally, they have made multiple attempts to attack the United States naval vessels sailing in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, including the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier, although the Pentagon says that these attacks have not caused any damage or casualties to the United States forces. On the other hand, the Wall Street Journal quoted an official in the United States Department of Defense who said that the United States military was able to confirm that several senior Houthi leaders were eliminated in the strikes in Yemen. According to him, the capabilities held by the Houthis stem primarily from nearly 10 years of Iranian assistance. He added, the Houthis are known for their false claims, which downplay our attacks and exaggerate their successes. Their messages are based on lies. So here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development with the Iranian proxy in Yemen. As always, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. Now, we conclude today's report by taking a look at the efforts to secure the release of our hostages who continue to be held in Gaza in the hands of the horrible terrorists of Hamas. The Saudi TV network El Arabiya reported on Saturday evening and cited sources in Egypt that Hamas provided mediators with information on the medical condition of the kidnapped soldier Idan Alexander, who holds American citizenship. The IDF also confirmed that in an operation by our forces, remains associated with the body of abducted fallen soldier Meni Menachem, who was murdered and kidnapped by the Islamic Jihad terrorist organization on October 7, were located. The IDF said that the remains were recovered from an Islamic Jihad outpost in Rafah, in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, but the body of this fallen hostage is still being held in the Gaza Strip, and efforts to locate and return his complete body to Israel will continue. IDF representatives updated the Goddard family and will continue to support them. And as of now, 59 hostages are held by the terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip, 35 of whom have been declared as deceased. And meanwhile, the Hamas terrorist organization informed mediators that it is ready to release 5 living hostages and remains of deceased hostages in exchange for the renewal of a ceasefire until after the Passover holiday, but demands a commitment for discussions on permanent ceasefire guarantees right now. Israel currently insists on the outline presented by the Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, which requires the release of 10 living hostages. The Prime Minister's office stated in response to the report on the outline that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a series of consultations yesterday following the proposal received from the mediators, and clarified that Israel presented its counter-proposal to the mediators in full coordination with the United States. And amidst all of these diplomatic moves, on Saturday, Hamas released a second difficult-to-watch video of Elkanah Buchbut, in which he pleaded to be reunited with his wife and his son. And in the video, he can be heard saying, "The real psychological war is me with myself, waking up every morning without my son. I'm choking, afraid of dying any moment." He is then seen crying out in tears and begging to be rescued from captivity, ending with him kneeling on the ground and covering his face in his hands in a sign of despair. Behind him is a photo of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The video was obviously scripted and edited by the Hamas terrorist organization in order to have the maximum propaganda benefit for them, and we will not show this video because we do not want to cooperate with their agenda. Instead, we will tell you a little bit about Elkanah. He lives in the community of Mevaseret Zion, not far from my house, and is married to Rivka, who made Aliyah to Israel from Colombia, and their 4-year-old son named Ram. He was kidnapped from the Nova party, where he worked as a logistical employee for the production company, and marked his 36th birthday last week in the Gaza Strip under Hamas captivity. So guys, please continue to spread the truth, share and follow us, and most importantly, pray for the peace of our hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip by the hands of the terrorists of Hamas. Pray that they return home soon, safe. Continue to pray for the IDF soldiers wherever they are, if they're defending us in Syria against terrorists, or in Lebanon against Hezbollah, in the Gaza Strip against Hamas, or in Judea and Samaria. Let's pray for their well-being, that they will feel the peace of God. Okay? Let's pray for all the civilians that are affected by these terrorist groups in this region, and most importantly, let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.